Hello and welcome to CIO Leadership Live. I'm Kathy O'Sullivan, Editor-in-Chief for CIO in Asia Pacific, and I'm delighted to welcome my guest today, Andrew Haddad, who's Chief Information Officer for Vodafone New Zealand, which is soon to be known as One New Zealand. Hi Andrew, how are you?
I'm well, Kathy, it's good to be here.
Great to have you here, and in what's been a very interesting time for you and the Vodafone team, but with the impact of Cyclone Gabrielle and your response to it, and also the big rebrand.
Yeah, it's very exciting. We're very close to the rebrand. We've been working on this now for several months, and it's getting very, very close. It's a very exciting time to be part of this organisation. And with Cyclone Gabrielle, yes, unfortunately, we were quite disrupted. Our network was quite disrupted across the country. And I think what is impressive is how not only we, Vodafone, but also work with our competitors, and as an industry, made sure that we got connectivity back up as quickly as possible, as safely as possible, to those communities that need it the most.
Yeah, indeed. It was great to see that response. So can you tell us a little bit more about your role as CIO and what your team at Vodafone, soon to be One New Zealand, do there?
Yeah, I've got a brilliant team of about 700 technologists. It's made up of permanent staff, contractors, and also partners. And we look after both our customer-facing systems as well as our core telco platforms, those that sort of drive our operation. We recently separated from Vodafone Group. Part of our ecosystem was using tools and systems from Vodafone Group. And so we recently separated and stood up our own ERP, our own digital workplace for 6,000 users. So it's quite a broad set of tools and systems that I look after and the team looks after. And I'm also the sponsor of our Agile Ways of Working, which we call Mahi Tahi.
Great. So, I mean, transformation is a massive part of what you've been doing there at Vodafone with pulling away from the parent group. And also transformation has been a huge part of your career. Indeed, you've had many titles with transformation in it. So, the word transformation, Andrew, it's thrown around quite a bit as if, it's just happening every day and it's just something everyone is doing. But in reality, it's not easy. It's not a given. So can you talk us through how that approach has taken shape in your own career?
Yeah, I think probably one of the most obvious observations would have to be the nature within which we engage with the business. It used to be fairly transactional, meaning we would sit there and wait for the business to give us their requirements and we'd go away and build something and then come back. It is far more collaborative now. IT are the business. We have a very interesting perspective of how the business operates. We see all of the transactions and all of the operations through our systems, but equally the business are becoming, far more tech savvy. So they want to provide input. They want to be involved in technology decisions. And so, cross-functional teams are becoming far more powerful, I think, in this day and age. And we often talk about, business-led and, technology being a key enabler. And that's true. But I think, the adoption of any technology that we put in is probably the most important facet of any transformation. And it can't be the technology on its own. It needs to be the customer journeys, the process. And of course, more and more we're seeing data, analytics, and AI playing a more important part in how companies are transforming.
So just digging into that a little bit more. So when you walk back from that end product of transformation, whether it's, putting in an ERP or, putting in some major change, what do you think from your experience are some of the key steps CIOs must take along the way?
There certainly needs to be a desire for change, and it has to come from the top, not only from the CEO, but from the board of the organisation. I personally spend a lot of time with the board talking about our IT strategy, about our roadmap, and keeping them informed on some of the key initiatives that we have going on. I'd say for a CIO, the role that we can play in these kind of transformations is being clear on the why. In fact, that's true for any program, big or small. being clear on the why, helping to set the vision and the goal. I also add trusted comms in there. So it's very easy for people to remember to communicate. I add the word trusted. And what I mean by that is being repetitive, using the same words to ensure that there's no room for misinterpretation for what we as leaders are saying. Making sure we have the right capability. When you're transforming an organisation through technology, that technology landscape is changing. It's important to remember to invest in uplifting the skills of the team that you've got, bringing in capability, and that may also be through partnerships, and then giving those teams the environment to be successful, whether that be through the tools or the processes, or even the workspace may need to be adjusted to make sure that they're getting the best environment for them to be successful. And I'd probably add to that the measures and controls, ensuring that whilst not being overbearing, making sure that the program or the transformation has got the right measures and controls along the way to make sure that we're on track.
So just on that, any change can be hard for people. What are some of the kind of common roadblocks that you've encountered along the way that CIOs should be aware of when they're setting out on a transformation journey, and either try and avoid along the way or have a plan in place?
Yeah. I guess more recently, one thing that's certainly true, I have a very big technology ecosystem, and there's quite a spectrum of, from legacy all the way through to the latest and greatest. Sometimes when dealing with some of that legacy, there is lack of documentation. There is lack of IP within the business, and that can add time, but it can also add risk to a program. So you've got to factor that in. You do have to build that into your planning. It's also important when talking to industry, learning from technology partners, and just being careful and clear and maybe cautious about the promise of how easy that technology is. Whilst there's many great technology products out there, it's never the technology that's the hard thing. It's usually the implementation, the integration, not only from a technical perspective, but probably more specifically from a change perspective. That's usually the biggest challenge that I find. Change is hard, and for large organisations, we have 6,000 people in our ecosystem, and when you're changing their tools and the processes and the way they work, that's probably the biggest challenge that any technology leader would be facing.
Absolutely. So then when you think about transformation, Andrew, do you see it as just an ongoing development within any organization, or do you like to see transformation as a project with, milestones and deadlines and celebrating the wins? Where do you stand on that?
Look, if you asked me this question earlier on in my career, I would have said it's easier to think of it as a project. But now in the executive role that I play, it certainly needs to be an ongoing, continuous improvement part of the way we work. So no, I don't think there should be an end date. The reason for that is I think any organisation that thinks of it like that way will quickly become less relevant in the marketplace. I do, however, think it's important to transform in a sustainable way, so as to not burn people out, and stop, pause at key milestones to celebrate the journey that you're on, instead of forgetting about all the hard work that people have put in and continuously looking forward. It is really important just to stop and celebrate.
Absolutely. Change fatigue is a real thing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So you mentioned this earlier transformation is a collaborative process. So in what ways do you as CIO collaborate and influence the Vodafone leadership team and the wider organization?
Yeah, I've got an interesting role in a telco. I work with very tech savvy executive as part of the tech savvy executive team. And look, I guess the way I think of these things is, the business strategy shouldn't be different to the technology strategy. They should be one and the same. And as an executive team, we've worked very hard to make sure that we're aligned on that strategy, on the vision, and we have a number of shared goals to make sure that we are aligned in terms of how we're going. For my team, I develop and produce what I call a team operating plan each year, and that makes sure that the way we're working, our key initiatives, our OKRs are aligned to one of our key strategic pillars. So we've got 4 strategic pillars in Vodafone, and one of them is around remarkable simplicity. And so I make sure that a big part of what we do aligns to that. The second thing I'll say is I touched on earlier our Ways of Working program called Mahi Tahi, and I think that is going a long way and will continue to go a long way to making sure that we are bringing technology teams and business teams together that allow our technologists to have a better understanding of the business outcome and value that they're creating, and also for our business leaders to have a better appreciation of sometimes some of the complexities of dealing with some of the legacy technologies that our teams have to go through.
Now, you moved to New Zealand in a very interesting time, just before the pandemic. How do you think the role of CIO has changed since we all had to, work from home overnight?
Yeah. Again, I think I've been fortunate in that being in a telecommunications company, what we do for our customers is around mobility and connectivity. And so we were put to the test, and I guess it worked for us. It was a relatively seamless transition for our staff. We did need to make some changes. Our retail stores were shut down, and we needed to move those staff into different support roles for our customers. And equally for our offshore teams, they all needed to move to work from home, and we needed to make some changes for them. So, I think for technology leaders, CIOs, we need to be agile. Technology is constantly changing. This pandemic just hit us pretty quickly, and it was fairly unprecedented. So I guess I was fortunate enough to be in telecommunications in this industry. The digital tools and the digital workplace that we've got gives our people the ability to work from anywhere securely, frankly. And as part of our freedom framework for our staff, they can choose to work 20 days from anywhere in the world, which is really part of the flexibility that we've got. And so, I think, it keeps us on our toes. Hopefully we don't have another one of these again.
Here's hoping. So you mentioned earlier, cross-functional teams are becoming more and more of how businesses are operating now with their technology part of different business functions. So what do you think are some of the key attributes of a modern day CIO when it comes to leadership?
Definitely the strategic aspect, strategic thinking. As I touched on earlier, the business strategy shouldn't be a separate thing to the technology strategy. For many organizations, they should be one and the same. Stakeholder management is changing. And again, it's more for me around stakeholder collaboration. It can't be a transactional engagement. We need to be working hand in glove with other senior leaders in the organization. Being clear on who our customers are. And I often tell my staff, our customers are anybody that uses our technology. They could be internal or external. They could also be some of our partners. Having clear vision and being innovative. There's no question that the business should see us, hopefully, as the technology advisor and that partner that can bring innovation to the business. And of course, leadership and communication. So, all of those things I've just rattled off are no different to any other executive member, I would say. It's just that mine is more technical in nature. I'm sure theirs is technical in a different way, but those attributes really no different to any other executive role.
So one thing that a lot of CIOs are struggling with at the moment is, that war for talent. There's a lot of roles that need to be filled and not enough staff to carry out those roles. So what are you doing to create that internal culture that really makes people thrive in their roles at Vodafone One New Zealand and makes them feel like they're really achieving those professional and personal goals?
Yeah. look, I touched on, trying to align our plans and our OKRs and our goals to the company's goals. And I think that's a fundamental thing that any leader should be doing. Having a fairly technical team, we've leveraged the Sophia model. It's a capability framework to help map out those competencies of the various roles that we have in our organisation. It's a fairly detailed model. It's probably a little too detailed for an organisation of our size, but we've taken the key elements of that to try to map out a career path for the various roles that we've got within the team that can show people how they can move about within the IT department, but equally into other parts of the organisation. As part of our regular one-on-ones, we train and coach our people leaders that they need to be having not only goal setting and performance type conversations with their team, but also around development and career conversations. And that's one, because we should care, but also because we want to be able to surface where somebody wants to take their career. Now, as part of all the change or transformation journey that we're on, that will always inherently create opportunities for people. And so having those conversations is a really important part and a really important input to meaning that we can help guide people into certain roles or certain career paths if that's what they want to do. And we've also invested quite heavily in training, and that could be a combination, or has been a combination of technical training as we've introduced new technologies into our ecosystem, certain roles. So whether there are tribe lead or product owner or scrum master or chapter lead, certain role training, and also leadership. Leadership training as we roll out our agile ways of working is also evolving, and so giving people that broader breadth of skills in how do you lead with in matrix teams or hybrid environments is a very important part of what we're doing for our team.
And another important component when it comes to high performance teams is, diversity. The more diverse your team is, the more likely it is to be a high performing team. And here in New Zealand, we've got, I think it's something like less than 8% of our workforce is Maori and Pacifica, for example, even though it's more than 25% of the population. So why do you think we don't have enough diversity in IT roles? And are there any practical things we can do to attract more people from different communities, different ways of thinking, different genders into IT here in New Zealand?
Yeah, that's look, it's a very important question, and I think the first thing we should be doing is talking about it and surfacing that we should be doing more. And there wouldn't be an organisation that shouldn't appreciate diversity of all types, whether it be ethnicity or gender or race or religion or experience or age is becoming more and more of a factor. Vodafone, what we're doing is looking at when we're bringing in people into the organisation through recruitment, is working with our partners and making sure that we're taking the time to look at maybe some of the, looking at different genders, for example, making sure that we're getting a good mix of resumes and candidates across our table. Within the organisation, so making sure that we are, training and looking for talent, not only within IT, but also within other parts of the organisation. I've got a woman in my team who actually started in our retail stores, who's now working as part of the IT team. I'm personally involved in some of what we call the employee network. So I'm the executive sponsor for our Vodafone Chinese community and our Pacifica community, which is really cool. And having that connection with members of those networks from other departments means that maybe they're more comfortable in having conversations with me about potentially moving into a technical role. And the third thing I think many organisations should be doing, or all organisations should be doing, is working with educational institutes on getting the correct blend or a better blend of those students taking up STEM courses.
So, Andrew, when you reflect back on your own career, are there any kind of mistakes that stand out that, even though they might be uncomfortable to think about, they really shaped you as a leader and in hindsight were really valuable?
This is a big question, Kathy. This is a very big question. How honest do you want me to be? Look, it's easy to get, I guess many technology leaders are good problem solvers. And I'd like to think that I am as well. And it's very important. It's very easy to just rush off and start solving the problem. And, one of the lessons I've learned in my time is just how important it is to understand the problem statement, making sure that we have good data that backs up and supports that problem before we run off and solve it. And so, establishing a program, setting it up, it goes back to my why. If you don't understand the problem statement, you don't have the data to back it up, it's always going to be very difficult to explain that why and the vision, whether it's to the board or whether it's to the team. So I guess at times I'm sure I have cut corners, but the more successful programs that I've run are those that have been set up properly. We've taken the time to set up the governance. I often say to my team, governance should be able to answer one very, very simple question, and that is, are we on track? And it's a very important question because without a plan, without knowing where you are on that plan, you can't answer it. But that very simple question, can be the difference between a healthy program and an unhealthy program.
So for someone who was aspiring to be a CIO or a CDO or a CTO, what advice would you give them?
Be clear on who your customers are. Internal, external, engage them for a voice of the customer. Don't be shy to sit down almost in an interview setting and ask them what's important to them, what their drivers are. But also don't sit back. Don't be scared to be a little bit innovative. As I touched on earlier on in my career, it was, the model was far more transactional. We sat there with a blank piece of paper and waited for somebody to give us requirements before we went away and built something. It's very different these days, and we need to be more consultative and hold hands with our stakeholders and lead them through the change.
And finally then, Andrew, what's important to you in the months ahead?
Our brand change is definitely one of the biggest and most exciting things that we're working on. But the group separation for us last year was a really big aspect that's helped set us up for that brand change. But the key thing for us beyond that is digitization and simplification. There's still quite a lot to clean up in terms of our system ecosystem and the ways we're operating. And so it's exciting times to try to simplify.
Well, we look forward to saying ka kite to Vodafone New Zealand and kia ora to One New Zealand. Andrew Haddad, thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you, Kathy.